Hey everyone, so I literally just got back from the theater after checking out Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu, and I am so ready to dive into this explainer with you all. I mean, it's been a minute since we've had Star Wars on the big screen, right? We're talking about the very first massive theatrical release for the franchise since the rise of Skywalker. Now look, I'm a pretty huge fan of the Disney Plus show. I absolutely love what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have been cooking up on the television side of things. So naturally, I was incredibly curious to see how Mando and the kid would actually translate to a giant, blockbuster theater experience.
And honestly, that brings us to the absolute core question of our explainer today. Does this transition to theaters feel like a massive cinematic event, or is it kind of just a really expensive TV episode? Because you know how it is, when a studio takes a beloved streaming property and throws it up in the multiplex, the expectations just skyrocket. You're suddenly paying for gas, you're buying that overpriced popcorn, grabbing tickets. We really need to figure out if this movie actually justifies making that leap off your couch.
All right, let's get right into Section 1, Return to the Big Screen.
Okay, first off, the presentation. If you walked into the theater expecting that classic, top-tier Star Wars aesthetic, you are going to be very happy. The craftsmanship here is just absolutely incredible. The production design, the costumes, the practical effects, it all looks amazing blown up on a massive movie screen. The action sequences and the stunts, phenomenal. Totally exceptional. And of course, Ludwig Göransson's score is an absolute high point, driving the emotion just exactly like it does in the show. Oh, and for my fellow animation geeks out there, we actually get some really generous screen time for Zeb. Having Steve Blum back to voice him is just a huge treat. The movie really doesn't have to do any extra heavy lifting to get us to like Djarin and Grogu because we already do, and they look absolutely stunning here.
Moving on to Section 2, the Invincible Hero Problem.
So here is my main issue with the movie, and it's a pretty big one. It doesn't really challenge the characters or the Star Wars mythology at all. It plays things very, very safe. There's this quote from our source analysis that I absolutely love because it just hits the nail on the head. Din Djarin is basically John Wick in a Mandalorian helmet at this point. He is so powerful and that Beskar armor is so incredibly resilient that pretty much anybody the same size as him doesn't even stand a chance. He just mows through everyone. And look, while that is super fun to watch, I mean the choreography is totally undeniable, it genuinely makes it hard to fear for his life. Unless he's fighting some massive screen-filling monster, the tension just kind of isn't there.
This really brilliantly illustrates a core divide we see in modern action cinema right now. On one hand, you have your skin-of-their-teeth heroes. Think Indiana Jones. He gets beat up, he's bleeding, he's barely escaping by a hair, and because he's so vulnerable, you are literally on the edge of your seat. But then contrast that with your untouchable heroes, like John Wick. They are just ultimate, unstoppable badasses. The Mandalorian relies heavily, almost exclusively on this untouchable trope. So the crucial takeaway here is that while it's extremely entertaining at the highest level of stunt production, you eventually become a bit desensitized to it. You catch yourself sitting in the theater thinking, yeah, Mando's going to be totally fine. You just don't feel the stakes.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, Pacing and Plot Stalls. See, when you don't have those high character stakes, your plot and your pacing really need to be razor sharp to compensate. Unfortunately, the movie struggles a bit here too. The film's flow basically breaks down like this. It kicks off with a really cool mission involving the Hutts. And get this, they actually speak English. It definitely takes a second to get used to because we're so totally hardwired to read subtitles for them, but it actually does a surprisingly great job of humanizing them. But then, after that mission wraps up, we hit this massive stall. The movie lethargically grinds to a halt for about 20 minutes. It feels like the plot is just restarting, kind of wandering around trying to figure out what it wants to be. And for a Star Wars adventure, which usually relies on that zippy cliffhanger-to-cliffhanger pacing, that is a really long time to be sitting in the dark wondering where the story went. Thankfully, it finally finds its footing again and delivers a really fantastic big finale that looks incredible on the giant screen.
Now, this brings us to a really fascinating theory from the source material. The idea that this movie is intentionally designed to be a palate cleanser. I mean, think about it for a second. The last time Star Wars was in theaters, it was Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. That movie carried the massive, incredibly heavy baggage of concluding a 9-film saga, and we all know it was wildly divisive. This movie, it's an unchallenging, popcorn-munching reset. It doesn't shake up the galaxy, it doesn't break the lore, it's literally just a highly watchable, entertaining adventure that basically says, hey, forget all that heavy stuff, just sit back and have a good time.
All right, Section 4, the Cinematic Leap Debate.
So this brings us directly back to our overarching theme today. Did this film actually utilize the theatrical format? Or could you have just watched this on your couch and had the exact same experience? Let's look at some historical benchmarks for TV shows making that big jump to theaters. When The Simpsons got a movie, it felt like a massive evolutionary leap in scale and animation, right? When the X-Files released Fight the Future, you could practically see the big screen budget on the screen. It had this huge cinematic scope that totally dwarfed the TV show. But The Mandalorian? The thing is, shows on Disney Plus already have massive blockbuster-level budgets. Because we are already so used to seeing incredibly expensive theatrical quality Star Wars on our TVs every single week, this movie didn't actually feel like a step up in scale. Honestly, it just feels like a standard, albeit a very, very good, extended episode of the series.
And finally, Section 5, the fast food verdict.
So where does that actually leave us? Let's wrap up this analysis with honestly one of the most relatable metaphors regarding modern blockbuster cinema. It's McDonald's. I mean, how perfectly does that sum the whole thing up? The Mandalorian and Grogu is reliable. It's safe. You know exactly what you were getting walking in, and you are absolutely going to enjoy it while you're consuming it. But a few days later, it just kind of fades. It doesn't leave a lasting, challenging impact on your cinematic memory. It's a solid, really entertaining palate cleanser that delivers exactly the flavor you ordered without challenging your taste buds whatsoever. And that leaves us with our final question for this explainer. Look, if you love the show, you are undeniably going to have a really fun time with this. But is it an absolute must-see in the theater? Honestly, that's completely up to you. Do you want to spend the extra gas, buy the popcorn, and get that big screen surround sound experience for what is essentially a supersized TV episode? Or are you perfectly content just waiting a few months for this reliable palate cleanser to hit Disney Plus? What did you guys think? Have you seen it yet, and did it justify the box office price for you? Let's debate it down in the comments. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown, and I will catch you in the next explainer.